Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of the Everyday Black Men Podcast, a podcast for authentic black male thoughts. I am Riker, and I'm joined by R. Reed, Armstead, and of course, DJ All Might. Please follow us on Twitter at EVYD Black Men, Instagram at Everyday Black Men, and the Everyday Black Men Facebook page. Website coming very, very soon. At this point in time, what I want to do before we start this next podcast is really thank our special guest, Dr. MAKEBA. She's wonderful. The podcast is awesome. There is a little bit of some breathing stuff there, but I've listened to it myself in headphones, and it's minor. There's a lot of information, so you may want to go find a pencil, pen, paper, or just take notes with your phone so that you can just kind of follow up on stuff. Not trying to endorse any one view, but I think that part of what we want to have is a dialogue, conversation, understand where everyone is coming from, and overall, let's just be healthy. Last, before we begin the podcast, what I wanted to talk to everyone about is that there's a movie that I've seen, and I'll go straight in with it. Now available on digital on demand from the executive producers of Birdman and Benny Boom comes Tasmanian Devil, the timely coming of age tale starring Abraham Atta. Don't miss the gripping story about the Nigerian immigrant Dio and his struggles to find a moral balance between his desire to join a college fraternity and bonding with his estranged father, who is a strict pastor at a local church. Own Tasmanian Devil now on digital and on demand. So, without any further ado, let's start the show. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another great episode of the Everyday Black Man podcast for authentic black male thoughts. And we have with us Dr. MAKEBA, and she's going to tell us about holistic medicine. But before that, tell us a little bit about yourself, Doctor. Where are you from?
I'm literally from everywhere. I was born in the Bay Area of California, an area right outside of Oakland. My parents lived there for a brief period of time. My father was termed at that time a radical revolutionary. I would term it as a evolutionary. That's how I would term it. So he was a participant and a creator of a lot of the more known movements now from back in the 60s. So I traveled quite a bit. I mean, we lived in California. I remember living in Kansas for a few years. We lived in Virginia. Long story short, my mom relocated to Atlanta, Georgia, when I was in the first grade. I remember my first elementary school was Peyton Forest Elementary. And I can remember saying, this is the craziest school, because it was an open concept. So you could see from the kindergarten class straight through the high school. So I don't think that worked out too well because they got rid of those type of schools. So I basically grew up here in Atlanta, but I spent every summer and a lot of Christmases in New York City with my grandmother. So I was very familiar with it. And then when I was in the 11th grade, I made a bold move and insisted and kind of demanded that I move with my father. And I moved to New Orleans. And then within a few months, we moved to Ghana, West Africa. So from 16, I did not finish my high school here. I was in 11th grade when I left. From 16 to 20, I was in Ghana, where I finished what you call secondary school, or AKA, it's kind of like high school plus junior college. Came back to the States for a year and then moved to Israel, where I lived for 17 years. Then I came back again, um, a little shy of 14 years ago, and I've been here ever since. So when I came back, it was me plus three. um, Left one, came back me plus three, me plus my sons, who are all now young adults. So that's why I said I'm proud to say that I'm pretty global, but for ancestry purposes, I'm African American and indigenous.
All right.
I didn't
There
expect
it is. Much respect. That is an awesome story. So, what made you decide to become a holistic doctor?
Well, it was really just a natural elevation, in my opinion, because I was born to two parents who were, they throw around this term conscious lightly, but to me, conscious is reflective in your lifestyle because it's a choice. So they were highly conscious. So I never ate pork. I remember going to school. I never ate white bread, and that might not seem like a big deal now, but growing up in the mid 80s, it was. Growing up in the mid 80s, people weren't, kids would ask me, what is that? I said, it's brown bread. And I would give them a whole history lesson on it. So I was always really health conscious. To make matters even more, my father exposed me to Dick Gregory very young. Um, I didn't realize till many years later what a privilege that was. I met Dick Gregory personally here in the AU Center when I was around 11. So
Oh,
I
that's
didn't
awesome.
realize the multitude of that experience until much later. I just thought my father was introducing me to another loud, crazy revolutionary like he was. And, but yeah, and this was during probably the biggest shutdown in Atlanta, Georgia. It was called the Missing and Murdered Children. That was a big deal, and I was in that immediate age group at the time. And Dick Gregory came to, well, I don't know if they still call it the AU Center, but the AU Center was Clark Morehouse and the one that don't exist no more, Morris Brown and Spelman. And he gave a speech, and he was going on a fast until they apprehended the correct person. And he began, and I'm gonna tell you how this ties in, because it ties into my interest in biology, in nature. So he was saying how the whole thing was a bunch of crap, and how they were talking about they found this forensic evidence. This was before they were doing like digital evidence and stuff in the Chattahoochee River, which was filthy back then and still filthy. And so he was basically saying that the brother was innocent and that this was a government thing. And he was talking about the melanin that is there are certain hormones and chemicals that only reside in the penis, in the scrotum of black males of enough African descent. And this can be used as a biological tool from the CDC because it's nothing like it in nature. So he said that's what it was about. And he was revealing, and I was into it. Just a picture, I was like 11 at the time. So they would have on the news every day missing and murdered children. I mean, it was a big sweep around the country. I can remember going outside, riding skates, bikes. That Halloween, no one did nothing. Everyone had indoor parties. It may be the norm now, but it wasn't in the mid 80s. So I was really intrigued with his conversation. And when he said he was fasting, I was just intrigued with, how does fasting have to relate with what's happening globally, if even if everything he's saying is true. And so I began to study it, and it got me more into holistic things, the mind body connection. And these principles are more known now because they've had movies out like Limitless, they have movies out like Lucy, and people know a lot more. But back then it was really a jump.
Excellent
And I
movie.
was so I was really in it. I said, okay, well, first thing, you have to be careful what you put in you, because that determines how many cells are open in your ability to be able to transmute, communicate with the cosmos, and just your ability to be able to access more of your brain power. Just in biology, I understood that. But so believe it or not, he kicked it off. And then he was the co-author of a book called Survival in the 21st Century. Okay, so now we're in the 21st century, but we weren't in the 21st century before year 2000. And they were talking about all these concepts, and all the old school people, what they used to call natural hygienists, aka a school term for a holistic person, were into this. So I read that book like 11 or 12, and I read it back and forth. They were talking about wheatgrass, and I just began studying it. I went to Benjamin Mays High School here in Atlanta. I went to it the second year it was built. And at that time, I don't know what's going on with it now. At that time, it was the prestige school in Atlanta because they had a math and science academy. So I'm hearing that it's not really the case anymore. But the point of it is, I went to school with like Maynard Jackson's kids and people like that, Andrew Young's grandkids, stuff like that. And they were all sending them to this school. So I was like, okay, this is supposed to be an elite school or whatever. Let me ask some questions. So I would go to biology class or science class and ask different questions. And I just noticed that, not only for the most part, I don't want to dog the school. This was many years ago. For the most part, my answers weren't, and they weren't answered. They were either deferred or denied. Like, stop asking that question, worry about your schoolwork, or this, and I was like, hmm. So that I was already highly interested in nutrition. I was already highly interested in the fact that with my knowing of biology, it's quite unnatural to have obvious signs of degeneration. I knew this at 9 and 10, and that we are the only mammals that after we reach adult maturity that we continue to degenerate where it shows externally. If you see a full grown cat or dog, you don't see the differences. You can't look at them and tell. Now you can these days with house pets because people feeding them, wrong. But in nature, you can't tell the difference between a dog that's 10 years old and dog year 70 and a 1 year old dog. So I used to always question that. And so all of that were the beginnings of my path. And then my father became vegan, which was interesting because my father is not health conscious. My mother was more health conscious and she was more vegetarian, but my father became vegan, and for the most part he kept it 95% of the time. And so that kind of pushed me to become interested in it. He did it as a matter of principle. So whichever way you do it, it was. And so then I was constantly in the circle of people that challenged me, and that if you want to help people, it just became an erroneous concept to me that nature cannot heal itself. I said it makes no sense. So in my own reasoning mind, before it was too tainted with education, it tells you differently. I said it literally makes no sense that you need a drug to get rid of diabetes when food costs, or to get rid of schizophrenia, or this, or to body build. None of that. And so I kind of went with my natural inclination, but that was a long way to say what gave it to me is I was always interested in it. And because of my exposure, it said, okay, this is what I want to do.
It is.
Awesome, awesome. Well, I mean, no, that it definitely is something that we needed the full explanation, so we had the full story on it. But I know that there's some differences since you've been around the world. You're seeing a lot of different people. Is there any differences between like the issues that you're seeing with Americans as opposed to the issues health-wise other people are facing in different countries that you've been in?
Oh, yeah, definitely. Well, being American, I have to tell people this all the time because often they say, oh, she's from Israel. And I don't know. I think it's my ancestor saying, always get people straight because this is my heritage, my lineage. And at this point, my country is just as much as anybody else who's probably been here 400 years. So that's why I specify that. But I would say absolutely. Um, Although I was going for a long time, I came back home and visited regularly. At one point, it was like a every 2 year schedule, and huge, huge difference. I've been to Europe. I haven't traveled as much as I wanted to, and but I've traveled more than the norm. But I've been able to compare a lot, and the biggest thing that I really noticed that Americans are just fat and sick. I don't know no easy way to put that. And if you read
Every
this,
day.
I mean, it
the
is what it
Americans are
is.
just and what they and what we I shouldn't say they because it's we what we when speaking of a consciousness what we consider healthy is like a half a foot in a grave. It's just ridiculous. It's only been in very recent times, like in the last 10 years it's been creeping up. The last 5 it's been hitting strong, that people are realizing no, just because something normal, which means it happens a lot, it's not healthy. It's not normal to be diabetic. It's literally not normal for Black men to have such a high rate of heart attacks and of strokes between that 40 and 60-year-old mark, which is devastating to me. I really try to help them. Like as soon as you get your kids out and get to enjoy life, you suffer this.
Yeah,
Okay,
I was
yeah.
gonna
What
say
were
at
you
this
saying?
age, it's
Oh,
but
Armstead. Okay.
yeah. But
What were you saying,
it's
Armstead?
yeah, it's younger now. I know the range that she said was 40 and 60, but it's actually younger than that. There's some that's having strokes and heart attacks in their 20s and 30s.
Yeah, so what I'm saying is it's 100% much more exaggerated in America than any place I've seen. There's several factors. One is the total um ignorance. When I mean ignorance, they don't know because they've literally just been taught wrong, and it's so indoctrinated of what is a healthy lifestyle as far as eating. It makes no sense. And like I said, that evolution is just now coming about. When you were saying it years ago, I had someone say to me, a gentleman say, "Oh, I don't believe in that hocus pocus." I told him, "What's hocus pocus?" "Oh, that holistic stuff." I said, "That's the craziest damn thing I ever heard." I said, "That's like saying you don't believe in the sun rising every day and the moon coming up. You don't believe how trees grow and maintain life for can hundreds of years." I said, "You don't believe that animals in nature, that mammals by far we died quicker than any of the other ones, and that apes and I think elephants in the wild hardly ever. It's hard to find a document case of an elephant that died of natural causes.
I
Most of the time,
have
yeah.
you have I'm sorry to cut you off. Have you watched the Game Changer? It's technically a documentary or movie on Netflix where it talks about the vegan lifestyle, and it showed different athletes and folks, like they did case studies and everything. And there was this one very strong man, very world class
Hmm.
athlete, and he's like a record breaker, and he actually he's vegan, and they are saying, man, how are you as somebody asked him, how are you as strong as an ox? And he was like, have you ever seen an ox eat meat? And my question is, I like my fiance, she's 7, 8 years vegetarian. I tried it a little bit. I tried the vegan lifestyle and everything, but like, and then I even tried the pescatarian. And then I want to say after like probably 4 months of doing it, I still had a craving for like red meat. So like, I know you said your dad went to the vegan lifestyle. I know you didn't say anything about yours, so I was gonna ask like, what is the whole like holistic perspective of like meat eating versus plant-based meal plans or
Okay.
diets?
So I became a vegan at the age of 15. I've been vegan 35 years now. So yeah, I did. And I've also been a raw foodist, so I can first address that. So it is the ideal, and to me the most, and my knowing, I can pretty much a matter of factly say it is the most ideal way for humans to eat. Now, there's a lot of factors in that. We've kind of busted the protein myth years ago. No one really addresses that anymore because it makes no sense. Elephants are vegan and gorillas are vegan. But the issue of it is that in today's time, if someone asks me, does veganism need a supplementation? As someone who has been vegan 30 years plus, I've had 3 children while I was vegan, meaning my body was organic. I was an organic vegan. So I didn't just turn vegan that day. I had been vegan decades before I even conceived children. So my bloodstream is truly vegan. And I conceived 3 healthy children who, by the way, are now MMA fighters, just went pro. I don't like it, but that's what they decided to do in
Yeah, I
2020.
seen that.
That's what they decided. And my baby who just went pro is also a straight A student who was in West Point. And I was a raw foodist with him. So we can, if anytime you can prove something when it comes to science, that means the other can't be absolutely true because he's way above norm of any 20-year-old. Because just by the fact that you got the buffets of white boys who went to Harvard who can't get in West Point. So I will bust that myth with that. The other thing I would say is it is difficult. It depends on who you are. Americans are more indoctrinated than any other culture that I have seen. And I've seen quite a few. So one is the way we think, two, it's in everything. When I was growing up, they used to teach us about fast foods and junk foods. But sugar's very addictive, and it's also very addictive, the dyes and the different things that they put in the foods. And this is the conversation I used to give 15 years ago. It's escalated to a whole nother conversation now because
Mm-hmm.
now what looked like a fruit and a vegetable is not because of that. Because now so much with the event of Monsanto and it's done gone into something else. But what I can say is that as the planet evolves, humans evolve. So we are not who our parents were. Our bodies can handle it. What it can't handle is too much of an onslaught. So cravings are natural. Cravings come from, I tell people, if you're a cigarette smoker, you may have a craving a year later. If you're a crackhead, you're going to have a craving. You're alcoholic, you're going to have a craving. That doesn't mean you should continue. That means you should find a better way to really eradicate it out of your cells because your cells turn over about every 3 to 6 months. So I noticed that in your case, which is quite common, it's always best to do a really good detox program. And you should do that program at least once a month for the first 3 months because you literally are what you eat. All of your cells are new cells every 3 months. So that craving that it's experiencing is the old meat that's laying dormant that has been in there for 20, 30 years. You're probably over 30. And even in your mother's womb, that's saying, up, you're not going to give us up that quick. You know what I'm saying? And you probably just didn't have enough of a vegan nutrition. Everything is
Mhm.
about nutrition. So I would say stuff like spirulina. I would say you have to eat at least one raw vegan meal a day. As a matter of fact, there's a restaurant in town called Taisili. Now, she has stuff we were doing 30, 40 years ago in there, but that's actually a raw vegan restaurant, one of the most popular restaurants in Atlanta. It's crazy, right? They got Soul Vegetarian right down the street that has. So, and ask them for it. So there is a science to it because you're literally changing your blood chemistry. And anytime you're doing that, you got to think of it like a drug addict or alcoholic that's been engaged for decades. That the substance doesn't give up easy.
Mhm.
It's like, no,
Look,
come on back.
That's
Yeah.
basically why they said. That's basically why they got that. People say like eat right for your blood type.
I have a question. What do you think of like the slutty vegan that's been very popular over the past couple of years?
Right. So Slutty Vegan, first of all, I'm very, very happy for the young sister entrepreneurship. It's just blown up all kind of ways. Do not make that a lifestyle if you're gonna be vegan. It's still very much processed food. I mean, from what I understand, she's either using the Beyond Impossible Burger. You can't get no more processed than that. Now, I don't even eat those because I've been vegan. To me, they stink. To me, those when you get those burgers in the raw, they smell like dog food to me. But I've been vegan for a long time. So I can't go backwards. As a transitional something, is it better than eating a burger that also is no real meat on the market? It's all been DNA genetically modified, and it's definitely going to clog your arteries. So if I was to choose a Beyond Burger sandwich over meat, you're still going to do better with the Beyond Burger. It's got tons of sodium in this, but it's not going to clog your arteries because the only thing, literally the only thing that has cholesterol in it is animal products. But it's at the bottom totem pole. It's very much a delicious, appetizing thing to do. But if you're trying to have a healthy lifestyle, you just can't eat like that. It's
you know,
all the time.
it's funny that was touched on. I was talking to the guys about South
Mhm.
Park, touching on realistic things and obviously a comical way, and they touched on the meat alternatives. Like you're turning crap, which is processed food, into another version of processed food, and just saying it's healthier because it's not a meat, but it's still a processed food. I actually, when I was big into fitness younger, in my my military years and whatnot, but even now, when people ask me about protein, like powder protein or something, I tell them I know I never took it or I never ate it after I educated myself on it because I was like, ultimately, it's still a
Mhm.
processed food. I was like, we get the same nutrients in vegetables and meats if you eat meat. So I saw that with the vegan foods too. I was like, it's cool because you don't want to eat meat, but ultimately, I'm like, the shit's factory made and it's processed, so you're still giving your body processed food. It's just the fact that it ain't coming from an animal.
It's more of a novelty for I see most people. They're just like, I just ate vegan today. I don't like. I just like you ate
It's a
slutty vegan.
trend.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's a
it's a
trend. Like
trend
it's
type of thing.
yeah.
Well, let me tell you, I had one of her burgers for the first time. It was ordered. It was sent to the house. It took forever to get it. I was highly impressed with the taste. I was like, I've been vegan a long time, and I've tasted some stuff that I think is, but it was definitely she put a lot into that. So I want to give her kudos for that. And if that is the first stepping stone, because I've had a lot of clients, for people to see that veganism, the positive that I would put on that is everything when it comes to cooking or preparing is just about seasoning. It's just it. So you can do something healthy
Yeah.
because the problem with Americans, they're just like, I can't. I've had so many clients tell me,
Mhm.
I can't. I can't do this because I just have to have that taste. No, you don't. Now you got a brain block that's not true.
No,
Okay.
that's a great point. Let's
Yeah.
continue from the brain block.
Yeah, I do
Hmm.
have a quick question though. So yeah, it's a brain block. So do you think meat is out of the question? Period. Like none, zero, or go ahead.
For an ultimate lifestyle, yes. But I don't when I take on a client. But the thing is, I tell people absolutely if you want to live a long time. But this is what I say because I've met some unhealthy vegans, and I've met people who kept a very healthy, just vegetarian lifestyle. People ate one meal a day, and who were actually a lot healthier. So everything is about principles. For so many reasons, I would say yes. the planet alone. But ultimately, what I would say to people is if you're generally healthy, then the healthiest things you could do, I could give you 3 free tips today. Fast once a week, 24 hours. Don't let anything break it. Don't let Christmas break it. Don't let a wedding break it. Don't let Armageddon break it. Fast 1 day a week. Now, if you fast 1 day
One
a
whole
week,
day, 24 hours?
yes, 1 day a week.
24 hours.
24. I just said 24 hours. That's a day. If you
I
fasted,
know that, but I just had to just. Okay, go ahead.
let me
Go
finish.
ahead.
If
Yeah,
you
that's free.
fast 1 day a week, in 7 years, you would have fasted a year. Now, everything in nature mirrors, your body mirrors it. And this is why farming practices, when I get a lot of stuff, I try not to get it from America. The reason is it doesn't matter if it's organic in America. America doesn't have any topsoil. And the topsoil is what gives plants most of the nutrition. And it doesn't have it because of my whole life has been a time where America really put the pedal on profit over anything being healthy. So they managed to come to this country, and it had had healthy soil for 350 years. In the last 50 years, they managed to do more damage to the soil in America than had been done the last 2,000 years prior. If you fast 1 day a week, what fasting does is your body simply has to rest. So, I hear that there are athletes on the line, and I know a little bit about sports. My father was an international coach. The body does not build muscle when in action, it builds it in rest. Everything in your cell works the same kind of way. When you eat, it takes about 70% of your energy to digest it. It takes megawatts of energy. So, what happens when you fast is all of that electrical current energy, because that's what it is. It's an electrical current going from your brain down your spinal cord. Because it doesn't have to do this tedious task of digestion, which takes anywhere from 3 to 12 hours. All of that energy is diverted to healing and repairing and detoxifying. It is the one key that will keep you living and keep you cancer free and other free. So if you could do that, the other thing was have at least a minimum of 2 completely vegan days. These 2 days, Tuesday and Thursday, I just eat vegan, mean I eat no meat. I have no animal byproducts, that no milk, no eggs. And when you do that, have at least one meal that is completely live, meaning that it's not cooked. It's not cooked. So, what can I do without salads? I was a raw foodist for 2 years. I came up with all kind of creative things. It was a learning curve because the people who inspired me, she couldn't really cook good, so she didn't do raw good. And then I couldn't eat. I was exposed to a lot of white people. They were like, "You putting everything but the kitchen sink in it." I was like, "Okay, I can't do that. I'll just eat a carrot." So it forced me in a position to create things that had a good taste. And now when I have my clients, I'm finding out they enjoy it. They be like, "Man, that's good." I'm gonna give you a quick recipe. So if I took some purple cabbage, I love purple cabbage, right? And I shredded it, just cut it up really small. I put it in a food processor. You can take white cabbage, purple cabbage tastes better. Get apple cider vinegar, extra virgin olive oil, and either some sea salt or some Himalayan salt. Get a little cayenne pepper, sliver some onions, and sliver some like red peppers. Put the cabbage in a bowl, the slivered onions and red peppers. Go ahead on and put a generous amount of the extra virgin olive oil on it. Then sprinkle the sea salt to taste, or sometimes liquid aminos. Then put about 2 capfuls of that apple cider vinegar, not too much, and just mix it up. Now, I like black pepper in mine. I like put some sprinkles of black pepper, or some don't use black pepper, they use basil. Okay, now you got a cabbage salad that tastes out of this world. I use this at food demonstrations because people can't believe it. And I have men who say all the time, "I can eat this," but guess what? It's not cooked. So by not being cooked, the enzymes are intact. And when enzymes go intact, they literally increase the nutrition of the food about 300% because it's all about what your body can use. Okay. So the raw foods is a big deal. It's why people like Dick Gregory, which I don't understand why he passed, was in such perfect health near 90. So I tell people, because they want to throw people like him in there. First of all, okay, I say, okay, look, Would you prefer? I know a bunch of 50-year-olds, 60 years already diabetic on 50 drugs. If you're not going to live to about 90 anyway, wouldn't you prefer to be healthy? And he always bragged that he was still functioning physically with his wife. Wouldn't you prefer to be like that than when you went down? But he practiced the fasting and the raw foods. And then he a lot of people don't know, but if you check his history, he's the one that detoxified the Beatles back in the day. That's what started making him famous, aka they were drug addicts, John Lennon and them. But probably everybody in entertainment field that I ever heard of back then was. And so
What's
by
wrong?
them,
LSD.
yeah.
Yeah,
So
wasn't that
they
LSD?
were
Yeah.
real doped out. They were real doped out. And he brought him back to life. So that's really what put him on the map as an international figure.
I,
But it was with the raw juices, and he taught them principles of how you could do it without the LSD or without whatever drugs they were using back then. And it saved their lives, and I don't know, they ended up dying years later anyway. But you get
I'm
my point.
keeping
I
count.
I had a
Said
question
two. What's
about
the third one? Hold on. What's the third
go
one?
ahead.
She said, I was listening. She said fast, two raw meals, as far as vegan and vegetarian a week. What was the third thing you suggested?
Eat a vegan meal.
No, that
Oh
was the
yeah.
second one. That was the second one.
Yeah,
Yeah,
but then
yeah.
she said
Eat
one
eat
raw meal.
2 days a week.
Okay.
Have a vegan meal, but at least make it a vegan day. But let one of the meals during that day, even if you just eat one meal a day, it should be all raw foods. I don't
So
care
that
if
was
you
all
have to
three of
go
them?
get some salads, get some avocado, put some tomatoes and onions, no cooked food.
So that was
Okay.
that was all three of them.
Yeah, that was all three of them. I thought I heard.
And
Okay,
and
no
then
problem.
the other thing I would say is completely eradicate about 5 unhealthy things. Like Americans got so many unhealthy habits, it just don't make no sense. Soda.
That's what my question was about to get to. Um, I have lived in at least 7 countries,
Okay.
and most of them in Europe. I lived in Afghanistan for 2 years. I
Mm-hmm.
contracted after I got out. I lived in Asia. I did some time in Jordan. Period. I'm getting to the whole. I watched how they ate, and granted, I know for the most part, people of the Middle Eastern and African countries, and a little bit of like the Asian, including India, they grabbed a lot of vegetables and fruits. They went towards rice heavily. They rice and
Right.
beans heavily, and meat. They went to certain meats. I mean, obviously outside of religious reasons. I think it was mainly like a chicken, and I mean it was limited in
Lamb.
some places.
Mm-hmm.
Lamb, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
As me, I'm not gonna lie. I gave my all to try to do the vegan, vegetarian, even pescatarian. And like you said, I'm. It makes sense now that weaning off of meat is a different thing if I've had it for all 35 years of my life.
Mm-hmm.
The reference to your animal analogy, I'll take turtle or tortoise. They live from what we know the longest, and they're
Mm-hmm.
all vegan, vegetarian
Right.
diets. But what about the predators? And their meat, they're obviously healthier than us. Like you said, they don't age, but they're eating raw meat also.
Okay, so that's a great thing. That and the answer is our system is what you call we are not omnivores. The predators
Hmm.
are carnivores. Okay,
Hmm.
we are herbivores. And doctors used to try to deny the obvious point, and they would point out the 1% difference between us and other herbivores, which are canines. But we actually that we have very slight canines, but that is to tear stuff with. What determines your when you look at biology, what determines in the animal kingdom the way an animal eats, it's categorized. Okay, let's go to mammals. So you have the so-called predators, the carnivores, you have the herbivores, and you have the omnivores. Okay, we are not omnivores, we are herbivores in our system. Okay, so
Hmm.
what that means is that the biggest thing that tells you is your digestive tract, and your digestive tract is aka your immune system. So everyone freaking out about immune system, that's your whole immune system. We are herbivores have long digestive tracts. They're usually about 7 times the length of the normal body. Humans is about 7 times the length. Gorillas is 7 times the length. Now you got omnivores. Theirs is only about 4 times the length. But when you're dealing with carnivores, theirs is sometimes only no more than the time and a half the length. And it's also the stomach acid. Everything is about that gut. The stomach acid in a carnivore is like 7 times that of a human. So when they eat that raw kill, the acid burns it. It's like being put in sulfuric acid. You understand? So any
Mm-hmm.
type of parasites they got in, the acid burns it. Then their digestive system, their intestines pushes it out real quick. We are carnivores. So when we eat the meat, not only does it go in and it sit there, we have an alkaline friendly environment that grows things. So now the meat sits there. Picture about sitting it out on the table in almost 100 degrees. You got 98.7 degrees internally.
Mm-hmm.
Not only is the acid friendly, saying, hey, come here, grow, multiply. So now
Mm-hmm.
you leave that raw meat out on that table. You come back the next day, you're going to see a whole bunch of maggots. And that's literally what you're doing in your system, because it wasn't made for that. It was made for that raw broth so it could say, hey, multiply, add more enzymes to my system, add more D to my system, add more chlorophyll to my system, which is an identical makeup to your hemoglobin. So when you eat the meat, it literally, you got parasites off the wazoo because of the nature of your stomach acid. And then when it does push it out through peristalsis through your intestines, it's at a much slower rate going through it, and much of it, because of the mucus that's developed, it kind of has like an allergic reaction in the stomach, and you develop a lot of mucus to get rid of the meat. Now that forms and starts forming plaque on the system. Now that plaque will correspond with a disease in your life. It will be your cancer, it will be your irritability, it'll be your this, or it'll be your that, because your system wasn't made to deal with it. So it doesn't have the components within it to absorb it and eradicate it for effective energy. Okay, let's put it like that. So it could do it, but you're gonna get, I know we got at least one mechanic on the line. It's kind of like if you just constantly put the wrong oil and gas in the car, but it's killing that engine, it's leaving a bunch of residue. It's the exact same thing.
Is that ultimately what led humans to heating up meat? I mean, I know you said it kills nutrients, but I mean, we are the only species that warms up its food.
Well, that was evolution over time. A whole lot of things have happened, since then, but I don't think they ever were supposed to happen. I think that everything is humans. It's interesting. I was studying this today. There's this guy he talked about epigenetics. Well, us in the holistic world, we didn't call it epigenetics back in the day. A simple term is the mind-body connection, and it's everything. So everything they started conceiving in their ability to create, that they could do something better than that was already here, than nature.
Mm-hmm.
That's it. That's where that came from. That's like saying, okay, was it always genetically modified food? No, these nuts start conceiving something ridiculous. Hey,
Mm-hmm.
we don't know what the effects of this is. Let's try this genetically modified something. Oh, we noticed that after 10 years, it's tweaking this person's DNA. We notice it's more birth effects. Humans are nuts. They're mad scientists. They're Dr. Frankenstein. So that's how it came about.
One thing that you touched on, what I thought was interesting, is something we touched on in the past. Concerning the government and diets, growing up, I remember we had the food pyramid, and then Michelle got in there and she did something different. I can't remember what she did exactly. And I felt like as I get older, I realized the government will never put anything out that they don't want to upset anyone. So let's say they do attack meat or anything to that nature, they would never do that, because the dairy farmers and all this kind of stuff, they think it's the heart of America. And with that said, where do you think would be the best place to find a diet that is more inducive to living a better lifestyle if you can't trust the government itself?
I say don't trust nothing you hear. Trust your instinct and certain common sense. That's the first. I just want to say that. Secondly, because I never thought we'd have a time where people were too stupid to know that they needed fresh air. And so the only thing I say in reference to that is, that's your most essential nutrient, because if you put your hand over if you squeeze your mouth shut and cover up your nose for long enough, you will soon realize that nothing is more vital for your life than oxygen. So that would mean you need to breathe it. So I never thought that we would come to this point that we had to discuss those type of elementary principles. But what I would say in reference to that is that I do have a tongue for a Mediterranean diet. It could be due to the fact that I lived in Israel so long. And
That's why.
Falafels are a common food, and those is chickpeas. That's
I
not meat.
love falafels, pitas, all that kind of.
I'm from
Hummus,
Yeah.
hummus, Hummus is
That
chicken.
Mediterranean food from the homeland is just untouched by
And
American
then
makers.
we use a lot of tomatoes, onions. Like I was actually gonna
Hmm.
go in December. I'm pissed because they done messed with my travel plans, and I just couldn't get stuck. I couldn't do
I'm right
that
with you.
mandate 14-day quarantine because they
Mm-mm,
escort people
can't
to the
do it.
hotel, put a guard right there, and watch you. So I'm
Exactly.
like, they getting on my
Yeah.
nerves. This interfering with my plans. But personally, one of the reasons was I'm just tired and I just wanted some real food. Just being there, the environment, everything is just so different and healing. I remember last time I was there, I didn't do nothing. I was eating all day. I must have lost. I had gained weight here. I lost the 10 pounds I had gained. That was without trying. My skin was looking beautiful. I was like, man, it feels so good to be here. And it was just the environment.
Have you interacted with the Pacific Islanders? That's who I started paying attention with the mixture of vegetables and like I've
Mm-hmm.
been with one of my old roommates was Hawaiian, and then I spent a lot of time with some guys from Guam, and I was watching them prepare food. You know, they love fish, but they love vegetables too, and I was telling me about
Right.
how the acids from the onions and the tomatoes, because people don't know how acidic tomatoes are,
Mm-hmm.
and how they blend and they create, this flavor that it's a natural flavor that we don't normally, touch out here because everybody we adding seasons and everything. They're not even adding seasons. They're mixing up the
Mm-hmm.
vegetables and certain herbs and creating this immaculate ass food. Like that's the best way I can put it. Like I noticed that from them. And then I used to also I noticed their skin. I've noticed like certain textures. Like I
Yeah.
was on the beach and just noticed how they looked compared to us. I'm just saying black people in perspective, but like,
You mean Americans? Americans look.
yeah,
Yeah, I get
yeah,
it. Yeah.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And it was just like, yo, their skin was nice. Their feet, like, if you pay attention to your feet, like, yo, I got all this dead dry skin, but you don't. You do this and that. You walk around barefooted. Like I looked at it like I attributed it to the diet kind of
Mm-hmm.
because I felt like I'm one of those folks that also believes you are what you eat or how you eat. At least even if you eat bad, you're gonna look bad.
Yeah.
But they look a certain way. But I noticed the vulnerability to alcohol by them. Like I know a lot of people from the Pacific Islands that are allergic to alcohol.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and it was interesting because I didn't, I mean, anybody can be allergic to anything, but I was wondering, to bring the
Alcohol
question
is
full
vegan.
circle. I mean, technically it is made from, plants and whatnot, but there's other stuff added into it. For those younger folks that always go out, like I only drink this often, though I drink this often, or people that do drink heavily, the effects of what alcohol does to the nervous system. Like, what is your take on that? That's pretty much what my question is, because I'm a social person with it, but I know people that
Mm-hmm.
go every day.
Yeah. 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 Alcohol is oh wow. Well, a lot of times alcohol is from barley, depending on either it's got just too much wheat, that grain in it, or it's a ton of sugar. The women tend to like the mixed drinks with the sugar. Men tend to go for the hard liquor, which in your body it turns to that. So of course it's going to cause the problem with alcohol is you're really increasing your chances for Alzheimer's, senility. um, I believe that the biggest problem with alcohol is the dependency on things to take us out of the reality we're in. And I want to address that. I want to say that we have just entered into officially, very arguably, a new epoch of time. I'm not making it up. You can Google it. Everybody can Google December the 21st, 2020. We've entered into what's called the age of the Aquarius, something that has been sung about for decades. As a matter of fact, right around the time I was born, there was a group called the Fifth Dimension, and they did the song. And so people say, okay, so what's going to happen if everyone's supposed to now be enlightened? And usually when you're talking about time, it just means that, and I can see it happening. It's hard to convince people of this. It's because the last age of time was dictated by fear and control. You could put a fact in a person's face and they just do it. So it really took havoc on the planet. And I believe the addiction to controlled substances, that was an out, because everything was about a couple, literally like a couple people being on top and everybody else being on bottom. So with most things, if you study history, no system lasts forever, particularly if it's this unjust, and we're speaking worldwide. And so we've officially entered into that age. So overall, my answer for that is alcohol was just a symptom of how messed up the colonial rule havoc the planet. Hawaiians were no exception. And so they generally had a tendency in their culture to turn to things that they were already culturally practicing, sometimes for medicinal purposes, and then they became habitual. So that's my true opinion when it comes to that. We come from a elfed up world in some ways, but we learned a lot of lessons. And now the whole world is on this vegan kick. Well, one thing that Al Gore was saying, and one of the biggest mistakes I feel like the past administration who just got out, is I was like, who doesn't like the planet? Like, how does that happen? Because you have grass in Antarctica right now, and you have snow in places that are like Greenland. I mean, when I tell you it's messed up, so people want to say, oh, this has no effect on me. Last I checked, your ability to be able to breathe oxygen has a big effect. So let me tell you how dynamic this is. Currently, the rise in asthma and respiratory illnesses in the last 20 years have risen about more than 200%. And the reason they've risen 200% because it's less oxygen in the air. So what humans do, you don't all of a sudden feel it. You don't want to all of a sudden feel it. It's going to be gradual. And so now you have a generation of people who grew up with not enough oxygen. Guess what? Oxygen, if it's not enough oxygen to the brain, what's going to happen? More strokes, more mental illness, more violence. All of this has to do with your brain being given the proper nutrients, and oxygen is by far the number one most important nutrient in biology is oxygen, then water. Food is up under that. Okay. So this is all a cataclysmic effect of the last 50 years of what's become so treacherous that we're just going to print money and keep that. Now we're at this point. Okay. So now veganism's become imperative because the United Nations put out in 2010, hey, look, girl, everybody got to go vegan. So they say, why? And they said, because 70% of the rainforest is cut down for what you call farm raised animals. So the trees are what give there's no other way to get oxygen. It's communication with the trees. So the whole biosphere is messed up. Remember, you used to be in school and you learned the curb cycle. Well, that stuff is true. But come to find out, trees is more important than people. So all of these natural disasters, although it's being done from NASA, I would say about 90% of them are due to them elfing with the planet and the natural resources to such an excessive amount. So imagine that they've done more damage in 50 years, it's predicted, than the last 5,000. That's how messed up humans are. They figured out how to do more damage from my whole lifetime than the last 5,000 years. So when you're thinking about nature and how long it takes to make a diamond, thousands of years, or it takes to do this, or it takes even for a tree to go, that much intensity in such a short period of time, of course you're going to have, it's going to cause this. It just so happens we're living now. So that's a really long answer to, and I think that things are going to start being addressed back to that. That's a really long answer. So that's just another reason to be vegan, or at least another reason to say, not just for your health, hey, how can I less contribute to the earth being destroyed? Or because they had to kill an
Funny,
animal for feed.
I kind of like made the connection of what you told us about what you answered my question about meat, which you saying you us put it in our stomach and it growing basically bacteria, life forms, maggots, etc. That the earth had obviously life forms before us, and things happened, evolution happened, new bacteria formed, new atoms formed, and we are that bacteria or maggot that is literally deteriorating the planet.
It's quite literal right now. It just so happened that we're the ones living in this time. So I would notice that because the last 15 years, 20 years have been bombarded with movies that showed you the end of the world. But most of these movies showed you what it would look like with an implosion. They're just getting you ready because it's inevitable unless something changes. So that's kind of my
Elon Musk's gonna do it.
Yeah.
Now, on the good side, the way I see it is I'm like, so you mean to tell me they were singing about this song 50 years ago? I didn't went through all the words. It is the theme song, my intro, outro song for my podcast.
The Dawn of
Now,
Aquarius.
yeah, it's my
I know
intro.
that song.
And then it became popular when they put it in the 40-year version movie. Okay.
Mhm.
And then they got Nostradamus and all these people that predicted about it. So I like to tell people, hey, we good. I said, we the part of humanity that gets to change the game. But how do you change the game unless you do something different? That's how I see it.
You
Just want
know,
to throw that in there.
to kind of go back to something you said. Nah, she went like when she was talking about alcohol, I thought about marijuana. And I feel
Mm-hmm.
like
I
the
did
legal,
too.
yeah,
Yeah.
because everybody I know who smokes every day, like I feel them to some extent, but like everyone I know ain't on the same path. Like I feel like you smoke so you don't have to deal with your life, and like it's stressing all day. Like, bro, why don't you deal with it? Like, I'm like. They're like, it's from the earth, it's natural. I'm just like, bro, you don't know that. You didn't grow that shit. Like, and like the way you're taking it in, like,
Yeah. They used to grow it 40 years ago. They ain't grew it now. Right.
and
Yep.
yeah, like I've seen people do edibles and all that kind of stuff, which I guess would be
You don't know
better.
what that is.
But
Right.
if you ever did an edible, man, I'd be paranoid as hell. Like I can't do it no
Exactly.
more. I
Can't do
can't like
edibles.
I can't do it anymore. But like I feel like the way you
um,
describe marijuana is the same people. But I know people who are still focused on marijuana. So I think is that like more of a genetic thing, or because most people I know are just losers, not losers.
I just think, just like you have groups of people, I think that's just what it is. So when we speak Hawaiians, they're closely related to Mexicans, and they're closely related to. They've never had high alcohol tolerances as a um as a
People.
species of humans, you know,
mhm.
and they kind of gravitate to that. Whereas we gravitate to, yeah. But I 100% agree with you. What I'm saying is I agree that I think that 90% of the time it's strictly to escape from reality. And
What do
that's
you
not. Mhm.
how do you feel about when people use it in regard to what he's saying also, we are creatures of habit. Do you believe that, or is that just an excuse?
No, that is very true. I mean, we are creatures of habit. That's why you have to break habits and form new ones.
It ain't
There you
nothing but a
go.
choice. It ain't nothing but a choice.
I mean, Armstead, I know you using that in the fitness.
Yeah, but I mean, once it becomes a habit, now you got work. So this is what I tell people: you're going to experience pain and pay the price either way. That is life. I could definitely speak about it when health. You know, so when someone says to me, I had a client last year thought she was highly educated like myself. I think she felt her university was better than mine, and but she was dying of the cancer.
Oh,
And with that being said, she was very haughty in speaking to me. And it's okay. I mean, because I'm speaking to a woman, I want to assist, but it's my job to evaluate everything about the person. And because a lot of psychological processes and how you communicate with people, if you're communicating with me as the doctor, uh, that's telling me a lot about you. So the biggest red flag for me was that if she didn't have the respect for me, I probably couldn't assist her in the best way. So I didn't take her on as a client because of how she was speaking down to me. Now you're coming to get a consultation from me, and of which I charged her. But the thing of it is, at the end of the day, she ended up taking all of the suggestions and doing it with someone else, which I thought was a little shady. And I was like, wow, that's interesting. Because when I used to read this book, I like Louise Hay, and kind of going into science of the mind stuff. And she has a book that corresponds a person's personality and the illness that's going to manifest. And it was really kind of thing because you can't cheat nature. I'm like, how you gonna cheat nature? You didn't cheat me. I don't have stage 4 cancer. If
in
anything, most Americans, period, become very try to do rights, do wrongs into rights. So everything first is a mind process, is my point. When you begin to really, because I deal a lot with nutrition and veganism, but I would tell you right now, the biggest thing is the mind. And it's, you could call it epigenetics, you could call it, and I was raised with that from my grandmother. My grandmother taught me that I literally have in me the God that I want to see. Meaning that if you want a million, I'm gonna show you how to do it, but you got to cut out any thoughts that's saying you can't. And she began to teach me these principles very, very young. I remember going to school one time and the teacher said, what did I want to do? I went to Ralph Bunche Middle School here in Atlanta. And this woman, used to have to write these reports or whatever. And when I told, my career path, she literally looked at me. I was in the 7th grade, and she said, that's so unrealistic. And I looked at her and said, you're not supposed to say that to me. I'm pretty sure that you're not supposed to defer my dream. Like, I'm going to Ralph Bunche Elementary School and I know what he stood for. So I went home and told my mom because,
Smart.
and I said, and my mom, that teacher didn't say nothing else to me the rest of that year. But the point is, I didn't realize how blessed I was that I was taught young that mind is everything. That is everything. And then my father used to made me read Seven Habits for Highly Effective People when I was very teenage. So habits are hard to break, but it's all mine. So the way that anything works in life, and particularly your health, and this is why I try to get people to see, you're gonna pay the price now. People used to complain about the price of a healthy vegetable. Okay, you could pay the price of this organic banana, or you could eat the canned food. And I'm against canned food, by the way, because canned food, just by the fact it's packed in aluminum, is highly toxic. You shouldn't eat it, period. But you could pay and you will develop the diabetes and stuff because then you could go to the doctor and your copay alone is going to cost 10 times what someone like me charges. And to reverse your health is very difficult because now you're breaking habits, you're breaking mindset, you're detoxing off the drugs that they had to put in you to keep you from imminent danger. So you're going to pay the price either way. So in conclusion, I feel that it's a blessing to live in the time that we do, where people are becoming more aware and therefore their choices. Okay. Do I push myself to do this and fight against myself? Because that's what you're fighting against. And okay, I failed this time. So let me read this book. Let me do this. Let me try to detoxify. Put all the energy in it because instead of just doing it, or do I pay the price later? And I'll say one more thing because it sounds very crude, but I said to a client of mine one time, he was diabetic, and when I met him, he had already lost 70% of his sight, and he was going to this medical center up in the northeastern part of the country. The medical doctor told him, after 2 months of working with me, he said, I don't know what you doing. He said, don't even tell me. He said, whatever you doing, still doing it. He said, because this is a medical phenomenon. Your blindness has already been reversed like 30%. And he hadn't paid me but a few $100s. So, and that was just doing my program. So when he came back to me and said, well, I want to go back on this drug and this drug, because I never suggest people go off drugs. That's on them. And I have them say it to the doctor. And that, fortunately, now medical doctors will on their own start reducing the drugs. It didn't used to be like that. And I was so upset because although he had seen this miracle, although he got 1.5 feet in the grave, his kidneys gone, he's going blind, he would prefer to go back to his comfort zone off of these things that he know is killing him after nature started reversing in 2 months what you messed up in 50 years. I was so messed up because it showed me the power of the mind. His belief system. I was like, so you keeping yourself safe from what? Because had you not did my program, you would have been completely blind right now. So at the least, according to the medical doctor, you're not blind. So why would you go backwards and take something that says it's killing your kidneys? Kidneys are related to the eyes and the heart, so you'll know. Why would you go backwards if you're showing improvement? To be safe, to make sure that you have this horrific death? So what I said to him is, I'm not coming to your funeral. And he said, that's so mean. And I said, I didn't intend it to be mean. I said, it's just difficult for me to see someone to consciously choose death.
Correct.
And that's, what I said, well, let me go more into the teaching field. And helping people. And some will get it, some won't. It doesn't mean you have to take the whole pill, but let's be aware of what it is. Let's not act like we don't know that when the meat goes in, it's going to do all these different things, because just that knowing will cause you to curb it a little bit.
One thing you said that I would ask a question about is, how do you fight against that will to be somebody different? So there was this thing I read. Well, I was listening to on Audible. It was talking about people who suffer from what is it called when you do things impulsively, right? So it said it's kind of hard to see the result. So you take the immediate action versus the long-term result. So how do you get people to fight against that action? If you know what I'm saying. Like, how do you fight against your impulses?
Everything you put into you is important. 7 Habits for Highly Effective People. I would suggest listening to the audiobook. Some things, these are principles that help people become millionaires, but I bet you anything, it's very rare that you come upon a self-made person of great wealth that you couldn't see it holistically in their life. Because once you start applying discipline in one area, it has a tendency to lap over. You know what I'm saying? You care more. You're not just going to blindly do stuff. So in the days of audiobooks, I had a young man say, well, I've never read a whole book in my life. I said, well, do an audiobook on YouTube. I said, just listen to it when you work out. There's so many different options. I want to tell you one. There's a woman called Florence Scovelson, and she has something called The Power of the Spoken Word, and the book The Game of Life. When I tell you she did this about 100 years ago, and it's, to me, I have read probably every self-help or metaphysical book that you could think of, way more than the average. And one of the most inspiring things, because when you get the correct knowledge, it clicks and the wheel does it on its own. That's it. So you really, the key, they call it education, is self-education and getting the right information and making a conscious decision to keep the other stuff. Because remember, this stuff goes into your brain cells all day, all day, all day, programming you. And what people don't realize is that almost 99% of the population is functioning off of a program that can be reversed. Remember the Matrix? And they think that it's their own desire. It's their desire within that program. So really the chief way to turn around anything, including eating habits, would be a different programming consciously. And I'm not saying you got to listen to a vegan guru, something just like 7 Habits for Highly Effective People. The same books that people use to get extremely rich is the same type of knowledge that needs to go into there when it comes to even changing a physical habit. That and doing something and putting a healthy habit in your life that really diverts your attention. I would say those things. And the last thing I'm going to say is tons of water. Water's your friend. About 95% of Americans are at least mildly dehydrated, which has all other kind of responses. Because remember, your system's an electrical, so it has to have the water. So yes, I pray those things help. And can I say one thing, because I do have to go.
Yes, you can.
You can always, I don't know how this is going to be broadcast, but I want to give my number if that's okay.
It
And
is.
if they call
Okay,
me and say they listen to this, they'll get a free consultation. You can hire a holistic doctor like me. My prices are very, very reasonable. But more so, I love to educate people and to empower them. So the number is 678-633-0529. The other thing is, please go and listen to the Dr. MAKEBA Show podcast, because this is only a small seed in a bunch of media projects. But the podcast, you could call in on Sundays at 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And the call-in number is 516-666-9834. That's just for the podcast. Now, you can always go to Spotify. We're on a ton of stuff. We're on Apple, but I like people to go to Spotify. All they have to do is put in the Dr. MAKEBA Show and they can hear any of the shows. Please listen, click, and share. And again, my personal number is 678-633-0529. You can check me out on Instagram at Dr. MAKEBA Mooring. So I appreciate you guys.
Thank you, Dr. MAKEBA.
Oh.
We really do appreciate you coming through. I appreciate
Thanks,
Armstead.
Jeff.
Special shout out to him to having this great interview, because we definitely do need to care more about our health. And one of the biggest things is just listening to someone and, incorporating some of those principles. I mean, even if someone just started with step 1, just have one day a
Yes.
week where they take 24 hours off, and then expanding into the other things that you mentioned, I think would make a lot of progress in their life. But we really do appreciate you, Dr. MAKEBA. We appreciate your time. And definitely, viewers, you have to check out her show. I know I'll be listening to whatever she's going to be having this Sunday later on as I'm editing this one. But no, we really do appreciate you, Dr. MAKEBA. And thanks again, Armstead, for setting this up.
Yeah, that no problem. She's the one who got me
I'll be a stranger. Come back.
Yeah, she's the one who got me doing how I'm doing now. Like, I'm not completely vegan or nothing like that, but I definitely cut pork and beef out.
I mean, you
You
made
don't know
me
what you're
second look
missing,
at that slab of meat I got here for dinner.
I'm
but
sorry, I'm not giving up bacon. I apologize.
I'm not going to enjoy it.
I'm not giving
I'm
up
looking
bacon.
for you guys.
All right.
I'm going to tell y'all a joke. No one comes and sees me around the mid-November. People start dodging me. That's like, I don't want to see you. The holidays are coming up. But, you know, what I say, we say in Hebrew, layat, little by little. So I appreciate you guys. Please check out my podcast if you can. And I will be back.
Will.
I'm Stad.
Well, thank you,
for
Dr.
inviting me.
MAKEBA. Ladies and gentlemen, what a podcast that was. I mean, that was Very interesting, entertaining, gripping. You learn something. I know I certainly did. I spent half the podcast not talking because I was writing stuff down. But this is where this will draw to a close. Next week, we'll have a continuation of this podcast where our unfortunate other special guest who was unable to talk, who would have had a lot to add to the conversation, will be able to say his piece. Thanks again. Follow us on Twitter, EVYD Black Men, Instagram, Everyday Black Men, the Everyday Black Men Facebook page, and of course, our website is coming soon. Peace.